to talk about the Treaty of 1725. And what that is, it's one of the first treaties that were signed in our territory, in Mi'kmaq, and it's the basis of all the other treaties. And what me and my friend Aaron Prosper, who helped me put this presentation together, and we've been doing this talk for a few universities already this year, what we like to get people to understand, and this is what's important about the treaties, is that what was the reason behind them in the first place? Why were they important? Why were we, and still today, so concerned with fishing rights? What happened? What were the events that led up to us wanting to be so worried and so interested in protecting fishing rights? So after doing all the research and a lot of work around the idea, and like I said, at Mi'kmaq de Burt, this is kind of what we came up with. The events that lead up to that first treaty is really significant because, like I said, the 1725 treaty is the basis for the other two main treaties that are signed here in Canada, the 1752 and the 1761 and 62 later on. And those are very important in the basis of what we have today in our moderate livelihood fishing rights. But where did they start? Why did they start? Why was it important? What led us to there? A lot of people don't understand that, and a lot of people don't even understand why protecting fishing rights was such an important thing. Before we talk about this here, which is like probably a good beginning to talk about what events led to the Treaty of 1725. We could go back really far, and we could be here all night, and we could have multiple discussions, but I'm going to try my best to fit a whole lot of events into one short conversation. Before we do that, one thing to understand about Mi'kmaq governance and Mi'kmaq way of living in a shared place with other Mi'kmaq people. And this is one of the things that I think English governors and English leaders did not understand when they first came here. You know, in Europe and other parts of the world, when you make peace with the king, you're making peace with the nation. So here, when they started doing business here in the colonies, when you make peace with one chief, the assumption is you're making peace with everybody. No, you're making peace with him, his family, his community, his village maybe his district, but he doesn't have understanding of, like, he's not going to go through the whole territory and say, hey, I made peace with the British. Now you made peace. It's not like that, but there was an assumption that was. So that being said, one of the important things that is kind of cool to understand when going into this discussion is that in the 1700s and the 1600s here in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick and PEI and Newfoundland and these whole maritimes, is that the Mi'kmaq people governed ourselves. Oh, lost the internet. The Mi'kmaq people here govern ourselves within 7 different districts. 7 districts. So think of our view as the Mi'kmaq as one world, and each one of these districts is one of our countries. And each and one of these countries is unique traditions, unique customs, even unique dialects within the language, and also a unique way of governing each other. Because you look at, let's say for example, Cape Breton. The whole island of Cape Breton is one district. That's Unama'ki. You go to Cape Breton, from here even, from Antigonish, it's a very different place. Very different place. Different resources are there, different animals, different species to hunt, different species not to hunt, different things to look for. And just across the water onto the mainland, also different animals, different species, different things to harvest, different landscapes. Every district that you go into, and you can see this now in Nova Scotia still, every part of Nova Scotia is very different, right? So the laws that each Mi'kmaq district had on governing itself was based on the species that were in that district, what species came in and out of that district, what we hunted, what you fished. There was always at least one main camp in each district. And along that main camp, there was winter camps in the interior, down the rivers, up the rivers, all spread out. That was the belief. Each one of these, well, I believe this. And again, this is just my understanding of the history, okay? Again, I appreciate you calling me a historian, but again, this is just my understanding, and my understanding of the things that I read, and it makes sense to me. Each district, again, got to view them as a country. Let's see if we have Nova Scotia here. Boom. No, we do not.
I think your HDMI cable might have slipped out there.
Oh. That's really annoying, I'm sorry. All right. Again, before we even get to this talk, boom. Okay, I'll just talk about it, I guess, when it comes to the 7 districts. Where we're at right now, and this is an important word, we are in the heart of Eskigowegik. Eskigowegik, that is district. The reason why Nalligitchkunichk is also such an important name is because a lot of us believe that Nalligitchkunichk was the heart of Eskigowegik. It was such a big community here, and it was along one of the greatest rivers in the county and the district. This river, follow it, portage it in a good way, it's going to get you to many parts. You could follow you right to Guysborough. You could portage right to the southern shore. Like, I came from South Shore. I came from Sheet Harbor along the river to here. I even stopped for a few, probably while I was late, I stopped at a few places on the 13-mile river there. Just took a few pictures and just try to understand that a whole lot of people don't even go into that interior and see that part of Nova Scotia. And it's just really cool to see. What I'm trying to say again is that this part of the district, Eskigowegik, this would have been very different as well from Unamangi. And this would have been very different from the Sebeganegedig part, which was Halifax's sit. 7 different districts. Within each district is a district chief. Within that district chief is a breakdown of all other chiefs for all these small little villages that are either up the river, down the river, in the interior, or down the interior, along the coast. They're spread out everywhere, wherever there's resources. Every district is set up like that. And we govern who can hunt, who can fish, where they do it, and how they do it, and how much they can take. Every district is in charge of that. When you go into someone else's district, if I'm going into Unamagi and I'm not going into Cape Breton without permission from anyone, and then I start over-hunting and I start overfishing their resources, just because we're Mi'kmaq doesn't mean we're, the same side sometimes, which easily gets us warring with one another because we're depleting their resources, and we see that, they see that as an act of war. So that's an important thing to understand on the Mi'kmaq view of each country, each territory. You're making peace with me, you're making peace with this country part of Mi'kmaq. That's kind of the way that I like to explain the whole part of Mi'kmaq territory that we live in, which is in all of Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, and the northeastern coast of New Brunswick. So, why King Queen Anne's War? Why do we start there? Cool, that's awesome. In 1710, the siege of Port Royal was happening during this war. Queen Anne's War, if you've never heard of it or you've never understood what happened, the reason why this is such an important event is because this leads up to a certain treaty in 1713 in Europe called the Treaty of Utrecht. Queen Anne's War, it's called Queen Anne's War because Queen Anne of England was in power, and they're in war with France and Spanish during the Spanish succession of throne. They're all fighting over control over this area here, basically. And there's a lot of conflicts and events that lead up to this in here in the colonies. but it's the war that happens over there. Mi'kmaq people were involved with this conflict, but it's difficult to say they were involved in a war as a nation. So we did make allies with the French, but they were mainly Acadians that were protecting their land against English, or they lived near Mi'kmaq encampments. An area of significant dispute during this war and leading up to this treaty is the area of Maine. That's where a lot of these conflicts are going to be existing. Queen Anne's War ends with the signing of the Treaty of Utrecht, but what's really important about this war, again, is the separation of what Acadia is and what's New England. And the Kennebec River in Maine, that's kind of the natural division of what they believed was New England and what was New France. So the northern part of Maine was all considered Acadian territory, but that river was constantly disputed, constantly. And after the Treaty of Utrecht is signed, which is a treaty that they signed in Europe, all these European nations decided in Europe who gets to control this land here, which ends all the conflict and the war during Queen Anne's War between all these nations and the nations that are here. One of the things that they left out when signing the Treaty of Utrecht in Europe, thousands of kilometers away from here, is that they did not include any indigenous nations into that treaty. They did not consult with them. They did not tell any of them that this was happening. They just went and did it. And then they just went on their business. It took almost 2 years after 1713 for them to finally explain it to many of the nations here. And they did not go well. Mi'kmaq people actually went to Fortress of Louisbourg and knocking on the door like, yo man, you guys had no business going and telling people that we're ceding our land and that you're giving all control over to the British. Really what this was for a fight for access to fishing. And this is where this is important. After the Treaty of Utrecht is signed and all the power is given to England, there's still some lands that are contested. That border between Maine on the Kennebec is one of the main ones that continues here. I think it's like in 1713, the first fortress on the Kennebec River is built going upriver to the Acadian territory and the Kennebec Nation, Abenakis that lived there. 1715, another one is, and then I think it's another one in 1717, another one is built. They're trying to get a hold on the fishery of that area of Maine, and they're also trying to get access and getting closer to Nova Scotia. All of these English fishing fortresses that they're building on the Kennebec River are going into Abenaki territory on the southern part of Maine. As further they go in, they're also reaching into Penobscot territory, which is around Bangor, present-day Bangor. And in present-day Bangor, there is one Penobscot community left. That community has always been a small nation, and that community has already been decimated by some of the wars that were before Queen Anne's War, which is a huge, I would really love to talk about that one a little bit more, because King Philip's War, which is a southern nation in New England, gathered up a bunch of indigenous nations to fight the colonies there, led to some of the conflicts that happened in Queen Anne's War, and also happened to decimate a lot of these New England tribes that are no longer there. The Penobscot are not very friendly, and they're already a small nation when it comes to this. There's not many left, but they fight, and they fight hard, and they fight back, and they attack with the help of Passamaquoddies and some Wolastoq, which are Maliseet, and the Abenaki. They attack each and every one of these fishing villages, campments, or fortresses along the Kennebec River, creating much conflict in that area. All along, the Mi'kmaq over here have no idea that's going on. But somehow we're getting pulled in. And this is what happens. After the Treaty of Utrecht again, what happens is British gains control over the, there it is, boom, Treaty of Utrecht. The treaty between British, French, and Spanish, which brought an end to the War of Spanish Succession. That's exactly what you said, Trevor. resulted in the ceding of land in North America by the French to the British. Issue. The signing of this treaty did not include members of the Wabanaki Confederacy who did not give authority to the French to cede their land or make concessions on their behalf. It resulted in continued conflict over disputed areas into the 18th century. Yes, you did say that. So the Treaty of Utrecht didn't really make any peace at all. It didn't make any peace at all. What it did was really gave the English permission to, well, you got control, you got rule and governance over this area, why don't you fish wherever you want. I think it was in 1721, do I put it here? 1722, right there. 1720, I think, was actually the first raid on a fishing village built in Cancel. You ever been down to Cancel? There's really not much there, right? 300 years ago, it was a booming fishing village. And it was built without any, same with every other one, it was built with no permission, no consultation, and no warning. And Cancel is a very important place because it is strictly across the bay from Isle Madan, Airse, and it's a direct line to the community in St. Peter's. It's always been for generations. Even now, after centralization, that community is connected to our community through Cancel and Guysborough because of the families that always lived there. It is a serious place for seals. Seals used to be one of our main things that we hunted, gave us access to a lot of islands where we hunted walrus and whale and Atlantic cow. I think that's what it was called. It kind of looked like a manatee or something anyway. When they developed that fishing village in Cancel, that was a big no-no because this was the first time the English and the New Englanders were actually making a presence in Nova Scotia, in Mi'kmaq territory. At the time, in Chignecto, which is the Amherst area of Nova Scotia, it laid a very, very significant and important Mi'kmaq community. And there was a chief there by the name of Ogumbo. And he was a strong line of chiefs that gave evidence that it passed from father to son, father to son, father to son. Actually, interesting fact about Ogumos is that they are the only chiefs, because it passes from father to son, that we can see are involved in every single significant treaty that Mi'kmaq people signed. We believe that if you wanted to get anything done in the 1700s, and if you wanted to make sure that something was happened, or maybe you have support, you have enough Mi'kmaq people listening to you, and you want more Mi'kmaq people, you need the support of this guy. You have to go to Signic, which is the Chignecto area, and you need Ogumbo to support you, no matter what period of time it is. I think during the 1720s, we had Philip Ogumbo there, and his son Joseph. And Joseph was a young man that led an attack on Cancel. And what ended up happening was that because he led an attack on Cancel, he made the Mi'kmaq people here in Nova Scotia involved on the attack on the English, which led them into this conflict that the Penobscot were having. This year is an interesting part of everything that happened during before the Treaty of 1725. And this year is more about the war that's happening in Maine. Father Rail, interesting dude. Guys ever watch that movie, Gangs of New York? Anybody watch that movie in here? Yeah? You know the beginning of that movie, Liam Neeson's a missionary, and he leads this gang of immigrants, but he's a priest, and he's like a very mean, fighting, bad-ass priest. Well, the missionaries of this time, this is who I picture of, like, so, who is this Father Rail? Father Rail is a big player in the events that lead up to the signing of this treaty. Father Rail, a missionary from France, sent to the Abenaki village in 1698. And he was there just to aid the Abenaki, build the mission church, and teach them about the religion and make sure that they follow Catholic ways. And he did so. He built a mission in the church, and he never left them. He stayed with the Abenaki people until he died, which was during this war here. I'm going to try to see if I can remember some facts about this guy. I think it was during the 20s, the 1720s, and the Penobscot people are really unsure about the New England people encroaching into their territory more and more and more. And they write in letters. They're trying to write letters. And Father Rail, he's with the Abenaki, and he's also helping out the Penobscot. So he's helping them write letters to the government there. And they're not really happy. And he's trying to explain to the government of New England that, you know, the Abenaki's not happy, and the Penobscot are not happy, and you guys are not holding up to the end of your deal. And it just leads to more conflict, because the English governor, the New England governor, he starts seeing Father Rail as an enemy, because during the attack on Canso, there's a belief that Father Rail was there, and no one really knows if he was or not. But there's a belief that he was there, and there was other attacks on other fishing villages that there's this belief that this Father Rail guy is there. And at the time, he's kind of a young man. And again, he's a missionary, he's a linguist. But he's painted as a bad guy. And they start sending propaganda against Father Rail. And the hunt for him becomes amazing. He becomes like the number one wanted, the most wanted man in the world during the 1720s. There's a picture here. Let me see what I got written down here. On Father Rail's War. So again, this is a battle that primarily takes place in Maine. A lot of people don't realize or understand that Maine is close, it's far, but it is a very important part into our relations with the Acadians, our relations with these other nations that live over there, the Wolusta, Penobscot, and Passamaquoddy. But also, we don't look at it as Maine. Can't look at it as Maine. The whole Bay of Fundy is really one place. The whole Bay of Fundy. And it's rich in resources, which is why there's so many nations living there. So when you think, why are there not any other nations in Nova Scotia? It's because at this time, mainly most of the population of the Mi'kmaq Nation were situated in the Bay of Fundy. The Chignecto area was a big place, and Cape Sable Island, which is on the south shore of Nova Scotia, outside of Yarmouth, that is a big place of population. New Minas area in Wolfville area, big concentration of Mi'kmaq living there. Annapolis Royal, big there, even in the Signet, the Wentworth area, Tatamagouche, and here, these are all big places, but the Bay of Fundy, there's one of the most concentrated parts of our population during this time, which is probably another reason why Port Royal was even built there, because that's where all the Mi'kmaq people are, and that's where all the Acadians are. Again, Father Rail's War. Sorry, I tend to go down rabbit holes a lot while I'm talking. And I hope I got you guys keeping up with me. The raids on these fishing villages is one that's important to understand. In Port Royal, there was a blockade coming in, and the Mi'kmaq blockaded Port Royal by Mi'kmaq in 1722. Battle at Jador, several raids throughout the province, includes on the British settlement in Canso, significant raid on Port Royal by Mi'kmaq and Wolustoq in 1724. In 1724 in Maine, there it is right there. There's Father Rail becomes such a hated guy by the New England governor. He sends 350 soldiers to this village, this Abenaki village. 350 soldiers. Father Rail already got word of this, and he bounced and he went upriver into the interior. But the New England governor raided the place and killed some men and women. All the warriors were gone, but he decimated the town of Norridgewock, which was the Abenaki village. Abenaki people don't live there anymore. It used to be so big that even the Mi'kmaq people referred to them as the Kennebics, the Kennebec Nation. The Abenaki were so big, and this battle here, after this battle, really decimated their nation. And they had to move from that part of Maine, and they moved them to Canada eventually, and settled in parts of Quebec. No longer in Maine, but that's just where they came from. After the Battle of Norridgewock, is when they attacked Port Royal, and then they attacked Cancel again, out of like revenge of what happened at Norridgewock. The Penobscot were already done with this war. The Penobscot were totally done. Like I said, their nation was being decimated, and they were becoming less and less. There were all of these small little events that were happening around this time as the Penobscot people were getting more involved with this war that was happening and the war that they got dragged into. They took captive some captains' kids, and there's a lot of islands in the Acadian National Park, and there's a lot of islands between here and Maine. And I think one of these islands were used as a hostage situation, and it kind of led to the Penobscot just kind of tapping out and saying, you know what, we need